Testing. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Hi guys. Let me know if you guys can hear me loud and clear. We are here early. Did you get the link? I don't want to call him if he's trying to. The judge will be on shortly. I just sent him the link. Not guilty, but he is guilty. He didn't get completely off, but he got off. The most important thing. So Sean Combs could be walking home by 8 p.m. tonight. He could be home by 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. And that is what the lawyers are arguing now to release him. To release him as time served. And the judge kept saying, Judge Joe Brown kept saying since the beginning of this trial, the Mann Act, the Mann Act, the Mann Act. This is not Rico, it's the Mann Act, the Mann Act. And here we have it. He's charged solely on the Mann Act. Hey, Judge.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm
Oh,
doing
turn your
okay.
phone. Turn your
What's
phone.
that?
Turn your phone so it could be wide.
Yeah, I am. I'm just bringing up my recitation of what the verdict was so I can read it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Here
So
you
I
go.
can share. Well, let me share
You
this.
can't see me, but anyway, here I'm turning it up so you can. You have to walk around the house to get reception. That thing, I don't know what that was. That's the typical way, but I can't get in because I'm permanently banned for life from YouTube. And Google and my system just aren't compatible. I'd have to go to Google Chrome, and I've got Safari.
Oh.
So when you bring me in that way and send me the link as the guest, it's simple. I just hit it and
Mm-hmm.
I get in. Okay.
All right. So about an hour ago, the 12 jurors came in, filled into the courtroom. Sean Combs is seated. The court deputy is returning a form to the forehand. So here we go. Count 1, racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. Count 2, sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura, not guilty. Count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution related to Cassandra Ventura, not guilty. Count 4, sex trafficking of Jane, not guilty. That's Jane Doe. Count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution related to Jane, guilty.
Where'd you get that one?
Oh, I'm sorry, transportation to engage in prostitution related to Cassandra Ventura is guilty. So he
Yeah,
was guilty on 2 counts.
those are the Mann Act, Jack Johnson counts.
Yes, the prostitution.
You know something funny? I posted that. I told you I was going to do it on X earlier. I was even surprised. Somebody immediately jumped on Grok and they said this recitation of Jack Johnson is correct. It was an act passed known as the Mann Act in 1910 because of the first black world heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, and his white wife, etc., etc. So they go around, they talk about an amendment some years ago. But the problem with that whole statute is the way it reads: transporting a female across state lines for illicit purposes. That is the original act. That's why the FBI was created, in order to get the information to come up with that act and for the specific purpose of prosecuting Jack Johnson. That's the origins of the vaunted FBI. Now, the thing that comes up is, one, it's sexist because it just deals with females. Two, what is illicit purposes? And in the case of Jack Johnson, which got brought up at the time, it was said that because Georgia did not recognize interracial marriages and he was transporting a white woman across state lines, that had to be for an obviously illicit purpose. Now, in today's time, that's too open to interpretation. Is that for paid prostitution? Is that for being paid as a porn star in something that's being carried on Pornhub, or that you can buy at an adult store? Is it because a girlfriend and boyfriend just decide to hook up after running into each other after the separation of several years? Is it flying your significant other by airplane to visit you someplace or take a vacation? See, so that act stinks, and although sometimes it's brought in good conscience, and it was used to get R. Kelly amongst other things, but that was a pedophilic situation, so allegedly and apparently proved according to some juries, but it stinks. And I used to have the same act that I would defend some of my pimp clients on 40, 45 years ago for transporting their prostitutes from West Memphis, Arkansas to Memphis, Tennessee, or from what is now called P Valley, as per the series that's out about that.
Mhm.
That's in Mississippi, just across the state line that way into Memphis. So, and for dancers as well. So it's an unsavory act, and we spent 18 months. And what Diddy is going to get for the initial sentencing will depend upon some very detailed, strict, um, and rather inflexible federal sentencing guidelines. Now, Jack Johnson, who was the original target, what he got as the first person ever arrested, charged, and convicted for this offense, he got 1 year in a federal penitentiary. He escaped, and he got more time for the escape than he did for the original sentence. So let's see what's going on. It might even be a situation with a time served. So the defense is apparently asking the judge to release Diddy, since these are not, in the scheme of things, very serious charges.
Well, let me read this real quick since we're talking about the Mann Act. The Mann Act, also known as the White Slave Traffic Act, is a United States federal law passed in 1910. It is officially named after the Illinois Congressman James R. Mann. The act prohibits the transportation of individuals across state lines of international borders for debauchery or for any other immoral purpose.
That's
It
illicit act.
Essentially, it targets human trafficking and forced prostitution.
I'd call bullshit on that, because the whole purpose was they did not like this big black heavyweight champion that could whip everybody, taking a white wife and her friend girl entourage across state lines to party. They did not like that. And I did a study of the legislative history of this act, and it is replete with those references. And even some of the senators who were involved said, well, what about mistresses? Does this cover situations where one of us takes our mistress across a state line, or travels abroad with the woman? And it was an assurance it did not. It was just targeting Negroes. And somebody interjected, it's in that very record, the word, the N word. And that was the specific purpose. They brought the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, into being to investigate this so they could target Jack Johnson. And that was the first person they got. And that's the racist origin, the vaunted Federal Bureau of Investigation.
So it says here historical context and impact. The Mann Act emerged during the Progressive Era, a period of social reform and moral activism. It was part of a broader movement to combat white slavery, which was a term used to describe the perceived problem of forced prostitution of young women and especially immigrants. The act's broad language was used to target individuals based on race, gender, and social status, and it was used to pursue cases that were unrelated to its or original intent. Famous cases involving the Mann Act.
Could you put a stop there? That is more BS. That is language that's in the amendment from about 3 or 4 decades ago that was interjected for that purpose. It had absolutely nothing to do with the issue of enslavement or prostitution. The specific wording was transporting across state or international lines for illicit purposes. which is embraced by part of what they did as an amendment.
So it says famous cases involving the Mann Act include the prosecution of boxer Jack Johnson, who was targeted for his relationship with white women. So the law is what you said it was. That's what it was. But society, because during that time, very racist, and I think interracial marriages were illegal. They used it basically um for the purpose to discriminate against race or maybe gender, or if you were an immigrant or whatever. So it was, what is that word? It was when you use something,
Discriminatory.
right. So you didn't use it for the right reasons.
Well, actually, see, when you have a piece of legislation and an appellate court gets a hold of it to assess what it's all about and whether it's valid, invalid, or not, or it has deficiencies or infirmities, they look at what they call the legislative history. And the legislative history is a practice that has been in place for years and years in state and federal legislative bodies. And what it is there's a stenographer who's taking down every word, and for purposes of the congressional record or the state legislative record, everything that's said is transcribed and recorded so you can go back at a later time and hear the committee discussions, the General Assembly discussions on the bill to see what was being considered. And if you read what was being talked about, it was completely racist in the various committees that this bill went through when it was passed, before it was passed in 1910. And it was replete with stuff like, we just can't have this big Negro going around with white women wherever he chooses to please, wherever he pleases. So
Right.
that's what is in it. And it was at the time called the Jack Johnson bill or the Johnson bill because the target was Jack Johnson. And we have to understand this. When you see the Black Caucus now suddenly in favor of the FBI, we have to take into context that the FBI was created to come up with the Mann Act, / Jack Johnson Act, and that J. Edgar Hoover was employed as sort of a undercover type guy. He was a sissy looking boy, and they had him in some of the brothels in New York where he befriended some of the prostitutes, and he was acting out as one of the third floor specials for those who like boys. And he got a lot of blackmail information, and he was able to use it to become director of the FBI shortly after World War I, and then further intimidate people through blackmail so that they passed legislation that allowed the FBI to be armed. And he set up a big PR campaign about how macho the FBI was when what they were doing is hiring special agents like Elliot Ness of the Untouchable fame and stuff like that, Melvin Purvis, who were police detectives who had a record for killing people because the typical FBI agent matched the requirements, which for a long time were that you had to be either a certified public accountant or an attorney specializing in tax law. Yeah, big macho categories. So the FBI was created to get Jack Johnson. In other words, it was a completely racist origin. Now, this whole thing about white slavery, that is a construct that was put in on this thing years, decades later. So it wasn't quite so unsavory. And to deal with stuff like the P Valley situation, which is fictional, or the real one, where some of my clients years ago used to bring dancers across from Mississippi or from Louisiana or from Georgia, or bring prostitutes in from West Memphis, Arkansas, and they would get them under the Mann Act. So I even had a situation to show you how far this goes. The DEA was targeting this particular guy as a drug dealer. So they started following his brother, who was a school teacher. And the school teacher, who had just gotten divorced, ran into a former girlfriend from his earlier years who had just gotten divorced. They were at a teachers' convention or meeting. at the dog track, which was located in West Memphis, Arkansas at the time. They ran into each other, got to talking, and one left their car, one of the cars in the parking lot of the Red Dog track. They drove over to Memphis. They stopped in a department store. He bought her a purse and some shoes. They went to a hotel. The feds busted in, busted him under the Mann Act, and were trying to hold it over his head so he would tell on his brother. But he honestly hadn't seen his brother in years, and there wasn't much he could offer. But that was a Mann Act prosecution. Two school teachers just voluntarily deciding that they were going to get it on and play rabbit, and the feds busting them under the Mann Act. Fortunately, I was able to resolve the person's situation. But in any event, that's what you have here. So all of that nonsense, proof of other crimes going back 15 years. I said it then and I'll say it again. Something smells to high heavens with this particular prosecution. It strikes me in my experience that this is something that was done to silence someone so they would not embarrass somebody else. And the target was the November 2024 election cycle, so certain people did not get embarrassed, because these were recordations that Diddy had that they seized went back 15 years. So there's no telling who prominently may have been getting their freak on that was filmed or taped, which is more than what was happening with that Epstein situation. So they got Homeland Security involved, and there's a unique provision within federal law that when Homeland Security is involved, they can invoke the Patriot Act, and people can be held essentially incommunicado, so they cannot talk to people outside of their attorneys, and then to their lawyers only on special occasions. And we interviewed someone, Dr. Carmen Johnson, that had been run through that whole rigmarole, and she advised on what happened with her, because she blew the whistle. Now, with this situation here, he wants to put up, what was it, a $50 million bond with 5 different security avenues in it on something that winds up with a common charge against pimps, hustlers, procurers for dancers and prostitutes. And $50 million is not sufficient. He surrenders his passport, voluntarily returns from an island that does not have an extradition agreement with the U.S. government. He gets a place in New York, which is a strange place for the prosecution, since most of the events that are in question.
What happened?
Are you there, or am I off again?
No, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, hell.
Yeah, people, and this is
Oh,
the
God
problem with
damn it.
people. People know that he's working, but they do it. They do this type of stuff on purpose. They do it on purpose. They do it on purpose, and it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that people are just that trifling. It's somebody black. I can guarantee you that.
Back. I'm back.
Yeah,
I put it on Do Not Disturb, but people keep calling anyway. Anyhow, it's a travesty when you let this thing get brought in like this. And they kept this man in on a $50 million bond. They would not let him post a $50 million bond. There was no flight risk. He had economic connections up the kazoo to the United States, stocks, bonds, securities, investments, all kinds of things that were subject to reach by the U.S. government in the event that he had failed to appear. And that is just absolutely atrocious. So now the defense is apparently requesting of the court to allow him to be released on the original intended bond or without bond, because under the guidelines, it may even be the case that he's got time served. Remember, this starts from April last year, and now we are into July. So that's been more than a 1 year. Now, I'm not saying he might not get more under the federal guidelines, depending upon how the judge applies it. But remember, Jack Johnson only got 1 year,
right.
and he
So,
was the original target.
and if it's prostitution, he basically will have time served. Now, I want to bring this up here. Um, this is, and let me do a special shout out to Inner City Press. This is a true journalist. He's been here day one in the courtroom, giving people line for line of what was going on, what were said during this trial. So I just want to fast bring it up to after the verdict was read and the jurors left the courtroom. Combs' attorney said his family is here and Kasana Bond. He could be released today to go back and live at Two Star Island. The judge said, "This is just coming up right now. I will hear from the government in a moment. Are you proposing he just walk outside now?" Yes. You you are proposing $1 million bond? Yes, and travel to Florida, New York, and LA. Now, this is the USA Comey. The U.S. opposes his release. A person found guilty shall be detained until the judicial officer find he is not likely to flee or be a danger. The defendant faces a maximum sentence of 20 years, even while faced with this case. He assaulted Jane here in New York, preparing to surrender. He had drugs in his hotel room, was ready to commit this same offense.
That's frou nonsense.
The
That's press.
and this is the judge says, I am not going to resolve this second. I need to review the statutes. Miss Comey, do you have a case in which bail was denied after a conviction under the Mann Act? You may confer and come back. We're planning to be here the whole day. She says, I am aware of cases involving minors, but we intend to raise relevant conduct at sentencing, the drugs and violence. The judge says, I'll like letters from each side. When? A few hours, AUSA. I think that makes sense. Mr. Combs does not want to go back to MDC. He is shaking his head. So 1 p.m. letters, and we'll convene in the afternoon. I'll let the parties know when. Combs' attorney says he will be a fool, which he is not, to violate any conditions, and the judge adjourns.
You know what? See, that is preposterous. That's just garbage. The realistic thing is this man's a multi-billionaire, right? Okay, he's got investments. Of course, he's got the financial acumen to flee, but what's the point? It's likely that under the sentencing guidelines, as a first offender in the federal system, with an assessment made of is he likely to commit a similar offense again in the future? Is it likely to act as a deterrent to another billionaire who wants to do it? Read Epstein, perhaps, or somebody like that. Is it something where, when you read the letters of recommendation, what is the utility in doing this? You get a situation that's just like exactly like one I was involved in a few years ago when myself and some other people testified as witnesses for actor Wesley Snipes in a similar situation, alleging he defrauded IRS, which turned out not to be the case. They found him guilty of 3 lesser included offenses, misdemeanor offenses of, quote, failing to file a complete set of returns, even though during the hearings I was present at, IRS tendered him $250,000 tax refund because he had overpaid his taxes. The fool U.S. attorney down there was hollering about revoke the bond, take him into custody. So the judge jumped the feds. Old Southern judge, he said, the court is not going to have that. He said, not only is the court not going to revoke the bond that has been set on Mr. Snipes, it is ordering the release of his passport. And Mr. Snipes, you may travel out the country. Just make sure you stay in touch with your lawyer so if you need to be back here, you can be. And you sit down. This man's been a contributing a contributing nature to the interest of the country. So that's what we put on the proof. There were 27 letters. The judge got particularly impressed by one of mine. So he called me as his first witness of the court to testify because the lawyers for Mr. Snipes just seem not to have it going on. So it is what it is. So sometimes what's going on here, and I said something about this before, Under the circumstances, a directed verdict might have been appropriate, but that would have left everything up in the air on appeal. But right now, see, if you let this thing go to a verdict, if you're the judge, you still can act on the two remaining guilty verdicts, but you now have three counts that are completely out of the way with not guilty verdicts. I told you several times over the last few months that sometimes the best deal for a judge is to deny some motions to dismiss and see if the jury will give the guy a not guilty verdict, which is in everybody's best interest. So right now we have some issues, which are A, what about the Mann Act itself slash Jack Johnson Act? How is that going to wash with the current U.S. Supreme Court that now is more strictly accommodating of the Bill of Rights and the interest of everybody rather than bending all the rules just to get somebody out of the way? That is something that's going to come up. The next thing is it's appropriate for the judge to have a bond hearing on these matters, but we still have a leftover from the Biden administration who is apparently in the civil service rather than appointed category as an assistant U.S. attorney. So we still have that garbage in. And that's one of the big problems with bureaucracies. Um, you may have a mayor if it's a local thing. You may have a governor. You may have a president who is an outright bigot, a screwball, somebody that's got a whacked out agenda. And he may appoint some people to be things like U.S. attorneys. And those U.S. attorneys will usually have some staff vacancies because people who are on the staff say, I'm tired of this. I'm going out into private practice or working for a corporation. I quit or resign. So they're opening. So this whack job hires somebody in there and it's a civil service position. So they stay until they get resign or get fired for cause. So you get a new U.S. attorney and he's the boss. He may be a wise, perceptive individual, but he's stuck with some cranks on staff. And you have never seen anything like one of these bureaucratic institutions, prosecutor's office, public defender's office, something like that, where you have some jackasses in there and you've got some conscientious people. And because you can't fire them, you got to work around the jackasses.
Right.
So
So
I was the public defender for the city of Memphis back in the 70s, and I know how that works. And my
so
later law partner was the public defender, and then the one after that, I got all caught up in that kind of stuff. So it's sometimes a mess. You got 120 employees, 45, 50 of them are good people, and you got 10 hardcore idiots that you have to work around that you wish would slip on some ice in the winter and break a leg so they wouldn't come in there
so
so you can deal with business.
we have some super chats, and guys, please hit the like button, please share this video, and if you have a question or comment, please send it via super chat, and I do have a goal in the chat. So thank you to Salty says, wasn't Diddy held without bail due to Rico charge with
That's it. In other
let
words,
me
that
finish
was,
let me finish reading it. With that off the table, will he be able to go home on bail for Mann Act? Anyone anyone being held for it that didn't have to do with children, time served? All question marks.
yeah, well, this didn't have anything to do with children. This is not an R. Kelly situation. So there's no allegation that you had children in here that anybody proved. There were allegations, but nobody proved it. So he wasn't convicted of that. Those acts were acquittals. Those alleged acts were acquittals. So what you have here is when you assess the bond, you have to deal with what he was convicted of. So you look at the guidelines and you say, let's see what kind of record he has because you are assessing the bail situation. Now, he's been charged before with stuff, but he's never been convicted of anything. And there was, that thing with
Mhm.
your girl. Um, and it is what it is. So
But here's the
you,
thing. So it says, with that off the table, the Rico, will he be able to go home on
he
bail?
might.
And
It depends on the hearing. See, in other words, I set bonds. if I set your bond, if you didn't like what I said, you had to go to the Court of Criminal Appeals or the state Supreme Court. I could override any lower judge in Shelby County when it came to a bond. And I did. There was a particular woman, she always set ridiculously high bonds. So they would approach me and she would have a tentative bond. But until it got docketed, all they had to do was make a phone call, and I'd say, okay, we got pretrial release done that. Let me see what the copy says. All right, hell, set an ROR for this person. This person is long connected.
I don't know what happened.
Hello, you there?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Here, come back. Yeah, he's gonna come back. People keep calling him. Don't know why. Here you go.
Again,
All right.
see, so you have these situations where you have to look at what this person is about. Have they ever failed to not show what is the extent of their ties? This guy has properties in California,
LA.
Florida,
Florida, New York. Yeah.
New York. He's got billions of dollars in investments. He's got employees. He's got staff. He has a vested interest in returning. What he got convicted of is essentially a minor offense in the federal system.
Yes. Now,
so $1 million bond is not sufficient for that. Hell, I'd be hollering about a $10,000 bond would be cool.
So let me bring this right back up here, because in this super chat he says, anyone held for it that didn't have to do with children, it should be time served. Now, the AUSA is all of a sudden she's arguing that I am aware of cases involving minors, but we intend to raise relevant conduct at sentencing, the drugs, the violence. So she's trying to all of a sudden paint this picture. He should not be released on bail, even though he's only been convicted on the Mann Act, because it was some cases that dealing with minors, but none of this came up during the trial.
Well, here's what you do, Madam Prosecutor. Now, you brought proof of these allegations forth during the course of this trial. In fact, they were pertinent to several counts of the indictment. And it does appear obvious from perusal of the record that the jury acquitted the defendant of these charges. So they were found without substance, and under American law, he's presumed innocent of them until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury rejected that. So we are entitled as the trier of the facts pertinent to this bond situation to reject them in totality as having been unsubstantiated. They're mere allegations, and that's not sufficient here. So what are you trying to do? How much time is he likely to get? Not the theoretical maximum, but what is he likely to get? In other words, in the federal system, you cannot have a plea bargain where you agree somebody's getting 1 year or somebody's getting 5 years. What happens is you have an agreement as to the crime that a person is pleading guilty to. And in the criminal system, the defense lawyers and the prosecution say he's pleading guilty to something with a 10-year cap, or he's pleading something to something with a 5-year cap. In other words, under his particular circumstances, the most he could get, depending upon the judge's application of the very intense guidelines, is 5 years. So he's pleading guilty with that. He doesn't have any time he's agreed to. That'll be up to the judge applying the sentencing guidelines. So you can't have a plea bargain. And under the federal system, except for certain minor youthful offenses and a few other misdemeanor offenses, there is no parole anymore in the federal system, and there is scant probation justification. So what you have here is under the guidelines. It may be the case that you've got a time served situation here. So if the guidelines are indicative of time served, which may mean the judge has to juggle.
Time served could be minimum or to the max, because AUS.
In other words, when I say max, it's like that's why I brought up this thing with a cap, which means the maximum somebody could get would say be 5 years. So if the maximum somebody under his circumstances could get would be say 18 months, the maximum, and here you are somebody that's been in for damn near that amount of time, it's like, okay, fine. Now here's where the judge will have to juggle this under the federal system. There is a thing called a motion for new trial. There's a thing called sentencing. The judge can manipulate his docket so the sentencing occurs first or the motion for new trial comes first. The motion for new trial is giving the judge or the court itself an opportunity to correct any errors that may have occurred during the trial before it goes up on appeal. Mm-hmm. He can do that and then get to sentencing under the guidelines. Or he can say, let's see what the sentence is going to be. And it may be that when he gets through with, okay, this guy has a situation where, like Geithner, the former Treasury Secretary under Obama, was convicted of the same offenses that Wesley Snipes was charged with. Geithner got a 6-month sentence and a $42,000 fine, and he had that 6-month sentence probated. So the question then became, is he got probation 6 months for defrauding the federal government out of $28 million in tax payments and a $42,000 fine, and then within 6 months he became Secretary of the Treasury, which meant he was the boss over IRS that had prosecuted him a year before. So he was charged with the same thing. Wesley Snipes' attorneys weren't very good, so he got 3 years in a federal penitentiary because he got 1 year per misdemeanor running wild for each sentence because his lawyers didn't know what they were doing, even though the judge was trying to help him. Meanwhile, Geithner had a good legal staff. He got 6 months suspended and a $42,000 fine for $28 million. Wesley Snipes got a $250,000 refund check.
So I wanna bring this up with the AUSA because just going back to whether he's going to be released or whatever, she did say the U.S. opposes his release. A person found guilty shall be detained until the judicial officer find he is not likely to flee or be in danger. She also says the defendant faces maximum sentence of 20 years.
Yeah, that maximum is crap. Okay, for example, if you get found guilty, let's say right here in Tennessee, you get found guilty of a Class A felony, the range of punishment is 15 to 60 years. Now, when they report it in the newspaper, they say he's facing 60 years. But as a pragmatic matter, this guy has had no prior criminal offenses. So state sentencing guidelines say he's a mandatory range 1 standard offender, subject to the minimum sentence, which is 15 years. But the maximum sentence is 60. Now, you take another felony, for example, manslaughter, because here that come up a lot. He's facing a maximum of 45 years in the penitentiary because he's got 3 manslaughter charges, 15 years each. 15 years is the maximum, 45 years. But under the state law, that's something that should be run concurrently or together. And the presumptive sentence is as a range 1 standard offender, which is 3 years. So actually all he's going to get is 3. But the newspapers report he's facing a maximum of 45 years. See, that's crap. When you start dealing with such like things like this, you may have somebody that is a mafiosa, and he's had a lifetime of crime, and that's all they could get. And you got a long rap sheet that's 4, 5, 6 pages long. I've seen them with 9, 10, 15, 20 page rap sheet. Yeah, you're going to literally throw the book at somebody like that.
So it says here, Bernard, thank you, Bernard. He says, Puff music is timeless, but he's not a nice guy. On another note, can we get into Andrew Gilliam? He likes to party too. Do you remember him in a hotel with men and with white powder substance? You remember? Yeah.
Yeah, but is he got a pending indictment?
No, he was never charged with nothing.
Yeah, I know. So
He was a Democrat.
you have to have something going on. You have to have a U.S. attorney say, we're going to submit these facts to a federal grand jury to see if they return an indictment if the statute of limitations is not run. And see, that's one of the screwed up things about this. Everything that they convicted him of on the state level, the statute of limitations is long run on all of this stuff. They could not prosecute him on the state level. And one of the big problems with this whole trial is something called proof of other crimes. They went back and they had all this nonsense of allegations he gave me drugs. Were they drugs or were they baking soda? Did you shoot this stuff up, snort this up, or was it sugar you were snorting up? How do we know? Well, it was coke. I got out. No, that's not sufficient. Did anybody get this stuff, seize it, and with a proper demonstrable chain of custody show that it went from this person who got it into their custody to the circumstances in which it was taken into their custody, transported to a crime lab, secured appropriately, and who checked it out of the evidence locker to examine it and test it, and what did they do, and who kept it to make sure that this was the actual substance that they're talking about, and how did it get back to court? The chain of custody. And if that breaks, you can't do it. So I told you this one jokingly. I think it was, what was Monday?
What? Why are people constantly calling him? Hello? Hello? He's gonna come back. I don't know. People keep calling him, honey. He's working. He's busy. This is important.
Now, I had a case. This is funny. Heroin is brown. It's not white like it is in the movies. And Hershey Chocolate came up with it years ago, 100 plus years ago, and they called it heroin, the H with Hershey. So Vice, or rather the narcs, bust into the place. The objects of the raid hear them coming, and they take all of the heroin and they dump it in the toilet. And when the narc rushes in, the toilet's flushing. So he can't retrieve any of it. And all he can testify to is, when I entered the bathroom, the toilet was being flushed and I observed a brown substance swirling around the toilet before it disappeared down the drain. And defense counsel argues, we all know what's brown and swirls around in a flush toilet after somebody just got up off of it. So how can you prove that's heroin? Because you don't have anything to sample. So you can talk about, we knew they were selling heroin in there. They can't testify to that in front of the jury. They have to prove it. So you've got these allegations where nobody tested the alleged dope.
And proving it is not a witness saying it was so. That's not proving anything.
Right.
We have hardcore evidence. So we have another super chat, another question. And guys, please like and share this video. Thank you, Camber. He says, ask the judge about the Rule 29. What is that?
Hell if I know. What does it say?
I don't know.
See, I used to keep a book of rules of evidence up there, and I go through it, but I don't remember that. It's been 35 years since I was on the 25 years since I was on the criminal bench. So I don't remember the details, and I haven't practiced in front of a federal court in 36 years. So anyway, go ahead.
I want to go here, right? I want to share this video of the outside the courtroom when a verdict was reached. And
crossing on the wires right now, Sean Diddy Combs is found not guilty on the racketeering conspiracy charge in this federal case. The verdict on the 4 remaining counts are not read yet. Here's another alert. Combs found not guilty in the sex trafficking of his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Here's another one. Combs found, okay, so this is count 2 now. Combs found guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs found not guilty of sex trafficking. And that applies to the girlfriend who went by the pseudonym as the name Jane. And CB, I'll bring you in. I want to read one more alert here because some of this seems to be a bit of a duplicate as it's coming in. Combs found guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution with the former girlfriend who I just mentioned as Jane. So those are 5 quick alerts that just came up on the Reuters wire, and we're awaiting more from inside the courtroom as we speak. Does that line up, CB, with what you have down there at court?
Bill, so what I'm looking at, count 1 through 5, the only count that I see that Diddy has been found guilty of is count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution as it pertains to Diddy's ex-girlfriend and accuser, Cassie Ventura. The other 4 counts I am seeing. Excuse me, let me backpedal a little bit, you guys. This is all breaking in. We're dealing with rolling thunder out here. So I'm seeing Diddy has been found guilty on 2 counts. The transportation to engage in prostitution counts. Count 3 among this crowd. But Bill and Dana, I know you've been watching the trial closely, and you know there are a slew of Diddy supporters out here who have come every single day. It looks like what appears to be one of Diddy's supporters is out here in front of the courthouse explaining to cameras perhaps why he believes his you know.
That's awful.
Which
you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Wait,
that's horrible reporting. That's garbage. What happens is the racketeering count 1, not guilty. You have 2 involving the known girlfriend counts. You have 2 involving the Jane Doe girlfriend. One of them is the Mann Act, transporting across state lines for illicit purposes, which they designate for prostitution, which isn't technically prostitution. It's just to get the freak put on. He's found guilty of that, but not of transporting her across state lines for other purposes. The other one with the Jane, he's found guilty of the Mann Act, transport across state lines, but not guilty of the.
Well, the reason why I didn't play that whole thing, because we went over the charges. I just wanted to fast forward to what was going on outside the courtroom.
You know,
someone he supports was vindicated.
They got heroes that they create, and they've got something in their mind where they identify with it. So it's not that person on trial, it's them. That's the stand-in for them. That's their alter ego, which is kind of sick, but that's what happens with celebrities.
So this is a question I want to ask, because media influence. You have, and listen, I will say, hey, shout out to all the content creators that was there throughout the whole thing. Tissa Tells, I actually sent you her video earlier, and you was like, she was annoying. These are not legal experts. Nobody
here. Of course, you have a multi-billion-dollar operation, NBC, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and you tell me that they can't do any better than a 23-year-old who is a junior college grad to come in and talk on what the law is, or they can't do anything but drag up somebody that has no experience in it, who can't pontificate on what the law is about. Even Grok on X did better this morning in reply to her posting where they just sustained exactly what I said about calling it the Jack Johnson Act. So yeah, they went into detail on it, but that is AI, and it's one of those things where all you're doing is coming up with a rote recitation, which is on the books, not an opinion. But bottom line is that this is just showing you the incompetence of the First Amendment community in the United States. The First Amendment is there so people can discuss things freely. What are they discussing? What the free press is supposed to be able to ferret out of the government, the economics, the business, and the industry of the country, and report fairly and accurately and objectively. But we do not have that. So they have another saying from 50, 60 years ago with early computers. It's called GIGO, G-I-G-O. It stands for garbage in, garbage out. And if the programming is garbage, then what the computer kicks out when it uses the program is garbage. So what happens is the whole First Amendment scheme breaks down when there's garbage being input into it by the structured press. We call it mainstream media because they don't know what the hell they're doing and they're incompetent to do it and they don't have the staff to do it. And they start dealing with ratings and putting it as an entertainment rather than as a public service. See, for most of the time we had television and all of this and radio, news was a public service function that lasted 15 minutes, maybe a half hour if there was something critical. Now it has become an entertainment in and of itself, thanks to CNN from 35 years ago when you had Gulf War I. CNN was the first 24/7 news service that they had on television, and it was going bankrupt until they got the Gulf War. And then it became relevant. You could tune in at 3 o'clock in the morning and you'd see an American cruise missile launched from a battleship going down the street at the 7th floor, whizzed past the hotel room where the cameras caught it. It made a steep right bank, and you could see it go into target, boom, and blow it up. So everybody had relevancy. But after the Gulf War was over, there was nothing to cover. So you started getting all these talking heads and then opinions. And then you're looking at a burning log cabin for 37 minutes and somebody, Chuck, what do you think's happening? I don't know, Al, maybe so-and-so. Well, Chuck, how about this? And it got to be an entertainment. And when it's an entertainment, it falls too typically in that category from 2060 some years ago when Caesar said, give them bread and circuses and the peasants won't give a damn what their betters do to them. And
So-
that's it, feed them and entertain them.
Right. So here's the thing. Thank you, Hella Mel. He says, hey, Dana, I miss your hat. Yeah, I just didn't put it on today. Hello, Judge Joe Brown. Judge, can he get 10 years on the Mann Act?
I seriously doubt it. There are some very strict federal guidelines, and you have to show intense justification if you deviate up from them. In other words, if the recommendation is this amount of time, if the judge goes above it, he's got to go through all kinds of hoops to justify that. Same thing if he goes below it. So the guidelines, thanks to Biden, Byrd, Stennis, Eastland, and that bunch 40 some years ago, 45 years ago, damn, time's passing quickly. But thanks to them, they put these sentencing guidelines in. At the same time, they abolished federal parole for most offenses and federal probation. Well, there's no federal parole at all for anything. So you get a 5-year sentence at 60 months and you're in federal custody with good and honor behavior as best you can get 56 to 58 out of the 60 months. If you get 5 years, you basically are going to do the whole thing absent a couple of months. So if there's a deviation to give him 10 years from the guideline specification, I don't think they're going to be able to jump through those hoops.
Here's the thing. The judge has to go by the guidelines, but the prosecutors, they're going to always push for the max, which they are in this case. But the judge, but this one is, because she's saying already 15.
She's not what I call the greatest in this.
Either way, it is the judge that actually is going to say he gets 1 year, 2 years, whatever amount. So and he has to go within that guideline.
Yeah, well, again, last time I was in federal court as a witness, to show you what this is, the federal prosecutor down there was trying to clown on Wesley Snipes, and one of the people called in as a character witness. The judge jumped up and said, look at here, Gerald, you just stand up, you open your mouth one more time like that, the court is going to jack you up. Do you understand me? I said, whoa. But you see, he was talking the same thing. And to a great extent, see, the people who are senior in a U.S. attorney's office locally have political ambitions. They want to be mayors, governors, U.S. senators. They want appointments to federal courts to have a good lifetime gig that they keep until they die or when they get ready to retire. So that's what they have ambitions to. Now, a personal thing, in my opinion, some of the lowest charactered people in the United States of America are career prosecutors. There's nothing wrong with being a prosecutor. A lot of them are good people and they're trying to promote justice. And they will stand up and say, Your Honor, in the interest of justice, the prosecution recommends that these charges be dismissed. That happens. but somebody who's done nothing but be a prosecutor before getting into politics for their entire career is a scoundrel, because they get used to too much power with no check on it. They lose all sense of proportion. And it's like having even a friendly tennis match, or golf game, or bowling match, or contest, or bid whist thing with a friend. They get vicious and they want to win at all kinds of costs. So this is a stranger. It's not a friend they work with, and they want to cut through everything, and they won't give up because they just don't get it.
So thank you, Canberry, again. So this person sends in a super chat explaining Rule 29, judgment for motion of acquittal. The defense filed it after the government rested its case. Can the judge dismiss the charges?
We can still remove on it. That's what I was talking about earlier. I didn't put the number with it, but there's already been the motion to dismiss. That's what I was saying about the other day. Yesterday, I think we were talking on X Space about the defense might have wanted the jury to come in and eyeball them, check out the body language, and see if they needed to posit a motion for a mistrial after the jury went out, so it's on the record. If they've already made the motion for a verdict of acquittal, or a motion for the judge to enter through the court a verdict of acquittal, that's pending. So that'll be heard as part of the motion for new trial typically. But in this case, I think the judge is going to have the sentencing first, so everybody finds out what they're arguing about. If he's already got time served, then he's not going to jail. But the whole issue comes up on appeal, so it's not urgent.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you, when it comes to Cassie and the Jane Doe, i.e. alleged 50 Cent baby mama, when it comes to the women who took the stand against Diddy, are they villains or victim? I don't want to say hoes, but, so here's my thing. Here's my theory. Cassie, the prosecutors most likely came to Cassie saying, if you do not cooperate with us, we're going to include you as a conspirator for participating in the sex trafficking along with Diddy. And that's why she became a witness for the prosecutor, even though, because this all kicked off with her civil lawsuit with Diddy. And then that's when the prosecutors later brought this federal Rico trial on him, using her as their main key witness. But he was not guilty when it came to her. So these women, are they villains or are they real victims?
It all depends. See, a lot of times, especially in the federal system, the prosecution is based on the prosecutors approaching somebody that was involved. In this case, there's the civil action that brings this to their attention. They approach and they threaten the prospective witness with prosecution if they don't cooperate with what's going on. Now, here's where the problem comes in. Any state prosecution, any of the 50 states generally, the defense is entitled to all of this information so it can find out that this witness was threatened. Go and interrogate the witness, get statements, and as soon as the trial starts and that witness gets, isn't it a fact, sir? Isn't it a fact, ma'am, that the government approached you and threatened to prosecute you if you didn't support them? And you can just tear the whole thing up. But in the federal system, you're not entitled to any of this information. They keep it like playing poker, where nobody gets to see what your whole cards are. So what goes on is you don't find out who all the witnesses are until the trial starts and they call them. Then you get 15, 20 minutes to look over a transcript of what they said in front of a grand jury. That's all you get. In the state system, you're entitled to a list of all the witnesses, their contact information. Not only that, you are also entitled to a list of witnesses that through the exercise of due diligence, the prosecution should have been able to come up with. They have to supply you with that. They have to tell you what they think the witness is going to say. They have to give you the theory of the case, and so on and so forth. So there is no trial by ambush. Everybody knows what's going on before the trial starts. in the federal system, they can keep their mouth shut. You don't know anything about it, which makes what they did when they initiated this prosecution against Diddy rather peculiar. They had 5 counts, which in a typical federal case, a very serious one where there is organized crime involved, ordinarily those 5 counts would be in 2.5 pages. They went on for 14 and then had an hour-long press conference detailing how bad a guy Diddy was before anything happened. Ordinarily, in a federal case, you have to file motion after motion after motion to get 30 seconds worth of that press conference worth of information. So there was something peculiar like that about this. And also that same office is the one that went after the New York mayor, where they had 58 pages on a small indictment, including a lot of pictures and everything, trying to ramp it up to show the mayor Eric Adams was such a bad guy because he used money to rent a room in this hotel that he didn't need to have to. It's not even a crime scene. So that shows me that there was a political purpose involved and a great deviation from their ordinary procedures. So we have that going. So these people that you have in the question you asked specifically on the tail end of it, with the big context in place, is this: the lack of personal responsibility. There is a concern for children getting done wrong. That is appropriate, that's necessary, and that's proper. But at some point, the child grows up and becomes an adult. So they insult women typically by saying this woman, though she is equal to everybody else, for some reason in the legal system, we want to consider her as a child, so she's not responsible for her actions. So what you saw with these 2 women was essentially a declaration by the system that there's some silly little birds who aren't responsible for their own actions. This one you have up here, the high bright one, got, what is it, 40 million, maybe $50 million out of it.
30 million.
30 million with another 10 coming up. So it
No,
looks like, yeah, I mean, there's more on that.
No, I think she got 20 million, then the 10, which is a 30, which
Well, she got a lot of money, and a lot of hoes is not getting that much money in their whole life, even if they're doing high-level switchboard. So,
she was
and then porn stars don't get that kind of money, and all she did was a live performance, basically, instead of being recorded and shown on Pornhub. So, bottom line is,
it was the abuse, with
yeah, but that's the pimp game. That's the pimp game. And the new mayor candidate for the Democrats in New York, the mayoral candidate, what's his name? I forget.
Zohan.
Yeah, he's saying you should legalize prostitution. So when he says legalizing prostitution, everything you heard here is a light edition of what the whole pimp game is about. So that's what he's talking about. So you've got one governmental prospect here, a potential mayor for the Democrats, is advocating making everything that this man stood trial to defend against legal. See, what you saw was a typical pimp hoe game. And part of the problem, which I'm surprised the defense, being well funded, didn't bring in some clinical psychologists to talk about, is the sadomasochistic aspects of this. I used to do this when I was a judge. When I had a pimp hoe situation, I'd get everybody that copped out or got found guilty evaluated, and invariably there is a masochistic thing going on in there and a sadist thing going on there, where one enjoyed inflicting pain, to wit the pimp, and the other one enjoyed getting it, the prostitute. And when you got it, it's like that flashed me back to when I was a defense lawyer. I could get the girl off of the street, but if she kept going back to the whole track, I couldn't get her protected because she'd put herself right back in the pimp's hands. And when I'd get them evaluated, sometimes I'd try to get relief for them. It would invariably come back on the psychological report that she had such low self-esteem that she fundamentally felt she deserved getting beat on because she was a bad person. And what she was engaging in terms of prostitution or the acts in question made her feel even worse about herself. So it's a bad person does these kind of things, so let me do it because I know I'm bad, and when I do them I feel worse, so I want to keep doing them over and over. Again, it's a vicious descending dialect. The dialectical situation is not good.
Mhm.
So this is what you have here, and the defense didn't put any proof on to that, but it turns out didn't need it because the counts that embraced that were not guilty verdicts.
The defense, that people were saying that the defense actually went light on Cassie because she was 9 months pregnant when she took the stand, and so I guess you didn't want to come off as a villain of, you know, really digging into her. But it was another witness to Jane Doe. They were a little bit more stern with her. So here's the question, because let's bring Hollywood into this. Listen, Cassie was with this man for 10 years. It's with women who are vanity driven. I don't care what women say, it's not, I guess it's not easy for people to walk away from all that fame, fortune, and all that attention that you get when you are with a very wealthy, high profile, powerful man. No matter
Well,
what he's into in the bedroom, because he was into some, you know, other stuff. He gave you a choice. This is what I'm into. If you are in my life personally, you have to participate, or you could just leave, right? So again, they didn't want to walk away, and they could have walked away like, I'm not into that, goodbye. But he has the fame, he has the fortune, the glitz, the glamour, sex, rock and roll, Hollywood. Do people so my question to you is, people throw all their morals and common sense out the way when it comes to this Hollywood lifestyle?
okay, here. First off, if I was running this defense, I would have had an attractive female attorney in there to cross examine her, a woman who was married with children so she could identify with. There's also a thing that female attorney would bring up the issue when she was questioning or cross examining this particular woman you're looking at here and say, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be equal to men? You're a woman and I'm a mother just like you. This isn't just what we have. So why are we suddenly weaker and not as able as these guys like the defendant over here? Why is it that we have to treat you with gloves on because you're so delicate and you're advocating that you're equal? And the other thing is this thing I was alluding to about sometimes people have to grow up and be responsible for what they do. It's kind of like, look at what they've done with these redeeming statutes on so-called sexual misconduct. Now, if I shot and killed somebody, aside from a criminal prosecution, and the family of my victim wanted to prosecute me for wrongful death, in damn near every state in the union, they'd have either 1 or 2 years to bring a civil action against me. But you turn around in one of those same states that gives you 1 to 2 years to bring a civil action when there's a killing involved, and they extend it to 40, 50 years for a booty pinch. Now, what time is that? Somewhere in there, something else is going on besides fair, equal justice. That means there's an agenda being run, and the agenda bespeaks, infers that women are somehow supposed to be inferior, which they are not. So that would have been a case for an attractive female attorney that was sharp on her feet, experienced, the mother, and married to get up and cross-examine that woman. Another thing, that woman could ask the witness, ma'am, now you engaged in this. How do you feel about this in terms of its long-term prospects? In other words, you're not yet a mother, but we have modern media. This isn't going away. So when your son, let's say you have, do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Well, I don't know. Well, is it a boy? Well, what happens when he's on the playground, even in private school, and he's 15 years old, and somebody says, hey, wasn't your mama one of those whores for Diddy? How are you going to explain that to him? Didn't you think about this before you decided to do it for all of these years, these decades, decade and a half? What's up with you? See, that is the problem. How does she, as a mother, explain this to soon to be nascent freak too, who is going to be 12, 13, 14, 15, and even if a private academy, what kind of changes are going to mask somebody? Hey, man, ain't that your mama? Isn't that your mother who was involved with Diddy that testified as to all of those sexual acts where she was acting as a prostitute
They
See,
don't
the
think about,
consequence.
because what, Jane Doe has a son who's what, 10, 11, and the father is a famous rapper allegedly. So
He'd tear his behind up on the playground when I went to elementary school. Hey, man, ain't your mama a practicing home? She high class, ain't she, man?
a
Hey,
sex
man.
worker.
Hey, man, did they have a, man, I saw some stuff, man. They carried it, man. I was looking at Pornhub when my parents weren't around, man. She had stuff splashed all over her face. Wasn't that your mama, man? You know, when she dating another rapper, was they both doing a man? See, that's the way we used to swing. Uh, Hell,
So,
my
so, so
barber used to be the same one who was barber for Kim Kardashian's first husband, and boy, they wore him out at the barber shop. Hey, man, don't that make you feel bad looking at your wife, man, when she was dealing with Ray J, man, and he was coming all over her face, man? Don't that make you feel bad? And he had to say, yeah, it did. So, I
well, I
mean,
mean,
these consequences.
it is consequences, but when it comes to Hollywood, fame, fortune, and attention, the consequences the people don't care about. Now, she is married with 3 kids and $30 million richer, which means her husband is $30 million richer.
And
So
is he simping her or pimping her? See, is he going to leave in 4 years and he's going to demand spousal support? And is
exactly.
he going to say, hey, look at the videos, look at her testimony. Do you want this woman to be the mother with the soul or exclusive of primary custody of these 3 children?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the thing, right? I want to let me bring this up a little bit bigger.
I
Um
didn't know it when I married the woman. I didn't find out now until she testified at trial.
So this is right now, this is outside the courtroom. People are still out there heavy because they have to come back. They're coming back at 1 p.m. and to discuss if he will be released today, yes, no, bond, yes, no. So I want to ask you, lawsuits. He has a whole bunch of dozens of civil lawsuits. And with this verdict, with this
Go ahead.
verdict with this verdict today, right? What's going to happen with the civil lawsuits?
Civil lawsuits are independent of the verdict. If Diddy did not plead guilty and admit culpability, the issue of liability has to be tried in those civil cases. Just like the OJ thing. He was acquitted of the criminal trial, and in the civil trial, where his legal staff was nowhere near as competent and capable as the criminal crew, he got found liable, and he owed Nicole's family and Rod Goldman's family some money for civil damages. So this is not dispositive of what happens civilly. That's totally independent. What the civil case is about is bribery. And I mean that literally. When you are allowed to go in and sue somebody civilly for harming you, it is the opportunity to get a bribe to keep you from taking matters in your own hand and coming up with a feud, a blood feud, or seeking revenge. The theory is okay, we try this guy for a homicide or robbery or embezzlement. He stole the guy's money. So the guy is going to be angry about his money getting stolen. So does he go in and have his boys find the defendant and slap him around, shoot him, cut him up, stab him, kill him, or whatever the case may be? Or do you tell him, look, if you go in a civil court and it's decided that you were in the right, then this guy will have to pay you money and compensate you? That's like in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church had what they call weregild, as in werewolf. And the weregild decreed by the Catholic Church, the decree was as a pound of pepper was worth any ordinary man's life. So if you gave the family of the victim of a homicide a pound of pepper, that's it. You had no more claim.
So I want to play this clip here asking that question.
Violin music. Is anything playing? I can't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You couldn't hear it? Let me,
I didn't hear the thing. It was silent. I was
sorry.
playing without.
Yeah, so let me reshare it. Sorry about that. I have to reshare it.
That a
You heard that?
I heard that.
Okay.
I wonder what leverage and how this changes those civil claims, because he is facing a mountain of civil claims. It felt like they were coming fast and furious there after he got indicted on the federal charges, the criminal charges. Then the civil deluge of lawsuits started to come out. Does this change the calculation on the civil side at all? Does it help him? What do you think the effect might be?
So certainly there were so many civil lawsuits, it was hard for us to even keep up. They were filed every single day. There's so many, and they all have different types of civil claims. The claims that were raised by Cassie Ventura, that case has been settled. That case would have been directly impacted by this verdict. Now, the civil standard is much less than a criminal standard. So the cases still go on, but certainly the fact that he is not guilty on many of these charges, that's going to be something the defense and those civil actions are going to raise. They're going to say that this pattern that a lot of these civil lawsuits allege, that there's a pattern of conduct, well,
Bullshit. This person has no authority, no expertise, no experience to make these statements, and they're wrong. The defense cannot bring up the fact that the person was acquitted of the criminal charges. The defense has to respond to the burden of the plaintiff putting on proof sufficient to establish that more likely than not, the civil standard applies and that they prove their case. So that is dead wrong. You can't even introduce it. Again, the OJ situation is a classic representation of that. Had he entered a plea of guilty, then you could use that self-confession in terms of establishing the validity of your factual claims. If he had been found guilty, that would not be admissible. So you cannot introduce a jury verdict of guilty to establish evidence in a civil trial, only a guilty plea. You cannot argue as defense that your acquittal in the criminal trial entitles you to any consideration of that fact in the civil trial. They're two separate things. The criminal trial is based on the desire for the state or the federal government to ensure public peace, dignity, and order. The civil matter is an individual claiming to have been wronged, who is seeking compensation, so that individual does not take matters into their own hands and seek personal physical revenge.
Okay. So I want to just finish playing this clip.
look at this criminal case, there's been a determination. That being said, it's not binding on any of those. So those continue on.
And the standard is so different.
So much lower. So it's beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal court, the highest standard under the law. In a civil court, it's what's called preponderance of the evidence, meaning if you believe he engaged in the conduct, 51%. So just over half, then he can be found liable. So it's liable, not guilty. And the result of that is civil damages, meaning money, not liberty, jail time, like a criminal case. But he's still got a lot of legal issues to face. I don't think those civil cases are going anywhere. They're going to move their way through the courts. They've been on pause. But interestingly enough, Laura, you don't have the same Fifth Amendment rights that you do in a criminal case, in a civil case. You can be compelled to testify. So he is likely, for the cases that don't resolve and settle, which many do, but the cases that go to trial, you could see him sitting for a deposition. You could see him sitting at a trial and giving testimony.
Could he
So
see
that's
him?
interesting.
Could you see him plead the fifth and say, "I don't want to do anything to incriminate myself"?
Well, at this point, the only time you could see the fifth being pled is when there is a real risk of criminal prosecution.
And that's now
so if
over.
it relates to these charges, no. If it relates to potential drug issues, stuff like that, yes, I could see that there would maybe be an argument, but you get a lot less rights as a defendant in a civil case than you do in a criminal.
Well, okay, now let's right there. There is action that supposedly took place in Florida, allegedly. Action that supposedly took place in California, allegedly. Action that tenuously is supposed to have had some influence in New York. We have federal charges that have been resolved, but that does not resolve potential state charges. So her little pontification about the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply for the same reason it did not apply to the Cosby situation in terms of it's waived. What happens is because there's potential state liability, which is separate and apart from the federal liability, Diddy's lawyers can say he declines to respond to that deposition on the grounds that it may tend to incriminate him relative to state charges in at least California, Florida, and New York. So he chooses to remain silent. So he'd have to get an assurance from New York, from Florida, at least 2 locations there and several locations in California relative to the elected district attorneys that there would be no prosecution before he could be compelled to respond civilly. So that's not exactly true.
So I want to ask you about the trust, because remember we had Candace, she came on a couple of weeks ago and we was talking about his trust, and he hired a professional to come in to help protect, or to give guidance on if it's guilty, if it's not guilty, what's going to happen with his trust, with his estate, with his wealth. So now that he's only guilty on 2 counts, and that's the Mann Act with prostitution, is his trust safe, or can
Maybe.
it, or can
See,
the
what they can do,
come in and break it open?
see, what they can do is, you just said it, they'd have to go through a state court to break it open. See, even if they get this, the feds don't have direct jurisdiction now that they lost the Rico count on being able to seize his assets, because that's up to the state in question. Remember, the title to anything he has flows from a state. So when you try to deal with interference with invasion of somebody's title, the exclusive right to the use of something or the benefit of something, you have to go through the state for the most part. So there is that. The other thing too, the plaintiffs might try to raise issues that in some states the statute of limitations is run on any criminal prosecution for most of what they were talking about. Now, that also raises the same issue about equal protection, which nobody ever raises. But again, it goes back to boom, boom, a wrongful death action. You get 1 or 2 years for the statute of limitations to file an action. But somebody says you have 25, 30, 50 years because of a butt pinch. You get to file an action on that. In other words, that is totally outside of the intent of the law, which has statute of limitations based on certain realities concerning seriousness, the interest of the public in something. And basically, when you have a wrongful death, you don't want one family setting up a vendetta against another. So there is a vendetta killing going on to get revenge. You say, we will compensate you or allow you to get compensated because your loved one got wrongfully killed. Okay. Now, obviously, somebody's going to get more worked up over somebody getting killed than somebody getting a butt pinch when they were 16 years old and now they're 63 years old. See what I'm talking about? It's like, what did we do here? Did we have a real legitimate expression of the interest of the law in maintaining public order, or are we trying to deal with what they call a boutique crime? In other words, This is a crime of the week because we're trying to get at these evil men who have been exploiting for so long, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's crazy. Now, I'm all for everybody getting equal, but you're either equal or you're not equal. And if you want to get special consideration like you are a child, in other words, the child statute of limitations on an action that he or she may have individually against somebody or something does not start running until they reach their majority, aka you've got the statute of limitations starting to run when they hit 18, not when they're 12 or 13. So if you want to treat this woman like she's still a child and irresponsible and not accountable for her own actions or seeing to her own interest, that bespeaks the whole thing about you trying to establish equality. That's like saying they need to be part. That's like this boys and girls sports. You grew up as a boy, you have a boy's skeletal framework and boy's muscle framework. You got a dick bouncing around in balls, but you're supposed to be able, because in your sick head you think you are a woman, you get to go compete against the females. That doesn't work out. And okay, I want to go into the girls' bathroom because I have a fantasy about being a girl. If I'm a wacko with that kind of idea, that doesn't make you a girl, and it doesn't entitle to the privacy rights of these real girls and women being violated because you got a wacko that wants to go in there. I don't care. You're just as much of a whack if you support that as if you think that.
So here's the thing. So people who are suing him, you have former employees, and these are some of the people who actually took the stand against him, like Capricorn Clark or whatever, suing him. But they were suing him under the same charges, some of the Rico charges that the feds were charging him in this federal case. So the ones that he were found not guilty of, the civil suits that they were filing under these charges that he was found not guilty of, most likely it's not going to go anywhere with these
Yeah,
laws.
not necessarily. It can. What I've been saying and elaborating on is the civil matters are totally independent of the criminal matters.
Mm-hmm.
The criminal matter is exclusively concerned with did Diddy do something against the public peace, dignity, and order of the United States. The civil matters are did he do something wrong against these individuals? That's separate in part with a totally different basis. That's so that the state or the federal government doesn't get into a situation of the families going up and trying to do something to Diddy and copping a case, federal case. But you see, these actions are civil. They're brought in state courts. And until these issues get resolved about is there any criminal liability in state courts that he might face, he'll be in the same situation as Cosby was, which I called the shot on that. I said they violated his Fifth Amendment rights because they went and compelled him to give testimony in a civil matter that was germane to a criminal matter, and they did not block the criminal prosecution. A new prosecutor came in and said, we're not bound by the previous declaration of the elected district attorney. We're going to prosecute Dr. Cosby. And they did. And they used the evidence from the civil case, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw it out like I predicted they would.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have these considerations. It's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm going at length, but somebody needs to start telling the American public what's going on. Because when I was in elementary school, they taught us these things, but that means the typical person in America hasn't had any of that. And if you're old, younger than 65 going on 70, you didn't get it.
Right.
So it's time to catch up.
So they are supposed to resume the bond hearing at 1:00. And you know, and apparently, listen, I know you have things to do. I have things to do. I do want to be up here for at least another 30 minutes. But the thing is, these people outside this courtroom here, and the judge even said, "Oh, we're going to be here all day." They're going to draw this thing out. And I said it that this is about Showtime. This is about ratings. They're going to draw it out up until 4th of July weekend with a big bang. Because either you want to give them bail or not. Either you want to say time served or not. It shouldn't take, I think, this long. Like,
yeah, it does. See, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to draw up. Does he have a criminal record? Somebody's entitled to check NCIC to see what kind of rap sheet he's got. Did any of this result in the prosecution? Are there any other instances of him? Are there any other instances? Oh, boy. Somebody's dropped off the package here. Hold on.
you going to go get it?
Hold on 1 second.
Okay. I just put him back. I was just going to put you backstage real quick. That's why the dog was going crazy, honey. Yeah, guys. So I really want to wait. I want to wait to see when they come. They're supposed to resume at 1, so it should be any minute, about the bail hearing, the bond, making bail. Will he be walking out today? Maybe, you know what? I'll drop the link if any of you guys want to come up, and I will drop the link in the chat if you want to join the conversation. We haven't done that in a minute. I just dropped it. Oh, wait, let me unmute you. Okay.
Okay, I'm back. This was important. Okay.
You know what?
This crowd out there, are they concerned about how their government's operating? Are they concerned about how the court's operating? Are too many of them out there because Diddy has become their alter ego and they identify with him? Are they out there because the alleged victims have been, identified as their alter ego in their mind? See, there's all kinds of stuff about this. And the other point, people have always been curious about their law in this country, which is nothing wrong with that. So that's a good thing. But the point that I'm pontificating on at length, and excuse me for doing it, is just what mainstream media outlet is giving us this, and why don't they have somebody with a great deal of expertise in this subject talking to you?
Because it's all about the ratings.
Yeah. It's entertainment. It's not a public service function where they're keeping the American public informed on what's going on so the American public can draw intelligent, reasoned, rational, logical, and objective conclusions from what they are hearing or seeing or reading. I keep saying that. Most of the time, stuff just runs off of somebody like water off of a goose.
So now, guys, I pinned the link in the chat. If you want to come on, you can. It says the Combs verdict lets down advocates for sex abuse victims.
That's not what the hell this is about. It has nothing at all to do with them. What the indictment says in federal court, and if you were in any of the 50 states, it says on or about such and such time, the defendant did XYZ against the public peace, dignity, and order of the state of New York or against the United States of America. In other words, the issue is exclusively whether this individual or individuals plural did something against public peace, dignity, and order.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that is proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then other things happen. It has nothing to do with some advocate. It has nothing to do with somebody's position. If they had standing, then they could have filed a civil lawsuit. See, that is this mess where over the last 50 years, the public has been conditioned to think me, my, and I when it comes into this instead of the big picture. It's about public interest. It's not about any individual interest. So you have cockamamie crap like this. The interest of so and so and so are left out. They don't count. And you know what? Let's break it down. Public peace, dignity, and order. What's that? You get out of your car to pump gas at a gas station. Can you count on a bunch of fools coming up trying to run into you? Hey, man, Mr. Spare change, spare change. Hey, baby, you sure looking good. What we going to do now? When we going to go for a ride in my new car you driving? See, that's public peace, dignity, and order. Or driving down the street at 5 a.m. through a residential district and you got your boom box turned up so loud or your car stereo system or sound system up so you're sharing it 4.5 blocks away. That's public peace, dignity, and order. Hey, man, you deal with Tommy Digger last night, man. You any good, man? And see, that's dignity. That's undignified. All of this stuff that we get glorified as acceptable is against public peace, dignity, and order. So we have mainstream media not understanding what it is and contributing to the disorder, the disturbance, and the loss of dignity in life. See, that's the only thing a criminal charge is about, not somebody's interest in protecting this, that, and the other. It's just got to do with public peace, dignity, and order. And if you've got a personal thing or a cause, then you file a civil action. You may even be able to get away with a class action.
There are a lot of celebrities, you know, that are weighing their opinions, still calling him a monster, yada, yada, yada. And people are taking it personal. They're looking at his character. They're looking at what they disapprove when it comes to his sex life. Or, of course, yes, he was a woman beater. We've seen that on video, which is unacceptable. But how about we tell our federal prosecutors or our politicians, let's have better laws, stricter laws, you know, to help curb domestic violence. Like, we're not having that discussion. So,
well, the point is, you already have some pretty strict ones with some very draconian exceptions to the rules of evidence that apply to everything else. It's a case of proving it. See, when you swear everybody into, you solemnly swear, you know, and then you swear the jury in and they're up there and they get charged with their gravity, the gravity of the situation and their duty, that he said, she said, BS does not apply anymore most of the time. So right now, there's no real need for any more statutory changes in this situation. They're already there. It's a matter of proving it. And see, we've been conditioned to think everything works like it does on television when it doesn't. You get to see what actually happened on TV, and you get to see the after effect when it's dramatized. In reality, I don't know the witness. If I know the witness, then I'm not supposed to be on that jury. I don't know the defendant. If I know the defendant, I'm not supposed to be on the jury. If I know the victim, I'm not supposed to be on the jury. I'm supposed to be unacquainted with everybody and starting on neutral, and the state or the feds having the entire and exclusive burden of proving to my satisfaction beyond a reasonable doubt and generally to a moral certainty that what they say is true. So every time somebody gets up on the stand, I get to check it out, seeing if they're shifty-eyed, can't make eye contact, if they fudge, if they look like, I've heard that before, and anybody says that is lying. I know they are, and the judge is going to tell me to use my own experience in life and observations therein to assess what I heard. So I'm looking at it, I don't buy this. I mean, it sounds good, but I don't buy it beyond a reasonable doubt. I got all kinds of doubts that it's credible. Like in this case, this woman's talking about she was forced and she was with this guy for more than a decade. She got $30 million out of this, and she had another boyfriend. She left and came back to it.
Well, this comment here by Lamina, you ain't saying in the super chat, but Cassie was groomed at age 19 from a businessman.
Well, that's fine. She's an adult. She can serve in the armed services. She can sign a contract. She can go vote and
But there,
determine
but when they
who gets
use the
in
word
to appoint these people.
groom, that's when they say women who are adults didn't know any better.
Isn't that trying to act like, well, I know we say she
And
is just the equal of a man, but we have to treat her like she's a child. Doesn't
now
that
you
seem
said,
a little logical?
and you said this too, Judge. You can only use grooming if it implies a minor.
Exactly.
And she was not groomed because she was an adult. She was not groomed. That only
All of the 19-year-olds I know that got killed, maimed, mutilated in the Nam, crap. All of the ones that are sitting up in an adult penitentiary, crap. All the ones that sign contracts and buy cars. Hell, I was signing my first contracts when I got 18 to try and buy some, build up some credit. You're 18, you're an adult. They passed federal law on that, constitutional law. At 18, you are an adult. So
Right.
you can't groom an adult because you can sign contracts. Under that, you are a minor. You aren't able to do that. But
Exactly.
some people want to change it. They want to say, let's take your minor to the vet and have them fixed or neutered because they want to be something else. That's
Right.
essentially what that whole thing is about, gender change and gender affirming care crap,
Yeah.
which is
So
take your child to the vet and have them neutered. Well, they can't make that agreement personally, and it's child abuse to make it for them. So wait till they turn 18. Now she's
exactly.
19, so she's over the limit. And you tell her when she's 19 that she's a child and see what kind of reaction you would have gotten.
Thank you, Ghost Rider says the era of the hashtag Me Too is over and believe all women are over. That's a little harsh.
Well, in other words, why should you believe this person just because they're a woman?
True. And women have been abusing that.
Yeah, and it just goes back to what the women were complaining about. Why do you accept a man's position just because he's a man?
True. And there are some real victims, men and women out there, but it gets overshadowed. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
It gets overshadowed when we are dealing with wealthy people or people of affluence or celebrities. That becomes a problem. Thank you, Boss Man says, great show. And the judge is very on point. So I want to ask you this, Judge. Money. Did money win this case?
Well, yes and no. From my experience of the last half century and having been involved in all of it, I'd say this. If you got a lot of money and you're wise about how you spend it, you can put together a pretty good legal defense team and defend yourself. If you're flat broke busted and you get a good public defender, you got just as good. See, the people that get jacked around are the middle class. They can marginally afford an attorney. Paying for the investigators, the expert evidence and the investigation and stuff is beyond their means. If you are broke and you qualify for the public defender's office, most of them in the big cities have a very competent investigative staff that consists of retired detectives who know their business inside and out, oftentimes better than the police who are opposition on the other side. You have lawyers who are in court every single day dealing with crime, and they have memorized all of the cases that apply to the general circumstances. They're in front of juries often. They are in front of juries knowledgeably. They attend courses on how to try cases, how to work juries, how to make presentations, how to cross-examine. You'd be much better off with a public defender than you would if you're in a middle class situation with the lawyer that most middle class folk can afford, unless you're lucky. If you're on the high end, you might be able to buy it. But even when you buy these high price lawyers, think of this. There are few people that can afford them. So that means if your fee structure depends upon rich folk hiring you, that means you aren't in court that often. So here's a public defender who might, just because he's trying to be about the business of being righteous. He's been in the courtroom 1,000 times and he's just getting paid a moderate salary. You get a high salary, but versus his 1,000 times in the courtroom since he's graduated from the same law school you did, you've only been in 25 times. He knows more about what he's doing than you do. So I'd say that. And then the other thing is like, just like you're a good basketball player, you know, a lot of that has to do with hard work, coaching, but it also has to do with aptitude. In other words, how tall are you? How physically coordinated are you? If you're a good trial lawyer, anybody can't be a good trial lawyer because it requires the same kind of thing to an extent that you get out of a stand-up comic. So can everybody and anybody be a good stand-up comic? No, they can't.
All right, so I sent the link to Peter, and let me see something. Peter, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm at the courthouse walking up right now. It is pandemonium. It is incredible.
Hey,
the trial of the century.
Thanks for last night.
Yes.
Thanks for last night. That was a good call.
You
That
heard
was
the
good,
judge.
right?
He said,
Judge, I'm thinking about going to law school. What do you think? Should I go?
Why not? You know what you're
Why
doing
not?
when you're a lawyer, don't you? Very quickly. You just become an expert in finding a solution to a problem.
I've always been a fixer my whole life, so why not be a professional fixer, right?
Yeah, you got that background. You got the real deal. I appreciate it.
Amen.
By the way, you ever been to Bamonte's?
Volantes in Little
Brooklyn?
Italy?
Go.
No.
When you were talking about your background last night, go to
Yeah,
Bamonte's. You might find an
All
interesting thing. By the way, they used to use it as a set for The Sopranos from time to time.
I love it. Judge, I hope you come to New York. I'd love to take you out to get something to eat because we could go walk around where, you know, my family was from, which is right on Sullivan Street. A place called the Triangle Club.
You know,
I'll leave it at that.
It's not too upscale, but I love Carnegie's and their pastrami and corned beef. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the best corned beef though is Katz's. Katz Deli is incredible on Houston Street.
And for pastrami, I love Carnegie's.
So, Peter, I want to ask you. So we're waiting for the bail hearing, right? For the judge to decide, you know, he can make bail or not. What is going on? Oh, wait, your connection. Wait, Peter, your connection. Your connection is off. You're going to have to go somewhere. You were fine before. You must have walked into a bad area. No.
Now.
That's better. So stay
Yeah,
there.
much better.
All right, so they shut down the plaza. You used to be able to go in there. People could eat lunch. You had all the influencers filming over there. Look at this police presence. This was never here like that at all. And all the influencers are out doing their thing. They're getting ready to film. You see, people are happy. It's Diddy's home, baby. Freak off tonight. So it's an exciting atmosphere. You know, I feel it's a great day for America. Overzealous, prosecutorial misconduct style case. It's a great day for all of us as great Americans. And I hope Diddy goes after the government. And I think the government should pay his legal bills for all this tomfoolery, balderdash, and hogwash, because that's exactly what it was. And you know what? As a taxpayer, I want my money back for this case. Maybe we have a civil case. We could do a class action. Judge, what do you think? Can we get our money back for them misappropriating our taxpayer dollars?
I think you're going to run into a sovereign immunity problem. But I know what you're talking about. Here in Memphis in 1979, 1980, and 1981, they had a federal prosecutor who was a clean freak, and he was upset by deep throat. So there were 3 separate trials they had in the Memphis area in federal court trying to prosecute deep throat. They were all unsuccessful. and they finally got stopped when the feds, through the Justice Department, said we spent too many millions of dollars on this. Drop it.
Well, hopefully they'll learn their lesson after this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. See, I've been saying before you got on, the first consideration is not Diddy. The first consideration is, are we worried about our government getting out of hand? So first off, a lot of a trial consists of, did the prosecutors overdo it? Is this a bad habit for the government to get? Because you see, if the United States government is out of hand, that affects potentially 360 to 400 million people. Diddy is just Diddy.
It was good that we were able to get that out to the audience, because, you know, there's a lot of useful idiots, unfortunately, in this country. I was talking to my cousin about it earlier. You know, the average IQ is literally a few levels higher than retard. So you got these people that are running around who don't know what they're talking about. They're susceptible to neurolinguistic programming. Never tripe the government. What we need is a renaissance in education, civic education, and if you don't assert your rights, if you don't use them, you'll lose them.
Why did you plead guilty? Well, I was scared something might happen. Why don't you take a stand and step up to the plate and see if they could get you? That's one thing that bothers me about our system. 97+% of all the people in the country are guilty.
I muted him.
I can't hear anything on that, but I'm just saying 97+% of the people in the penitentiaries of America pled guilty. Just a little more than 2% were found guilty by a jury, and out of that 97%, 83 to 87% confessed. So what does that say? Some people need to step up to the plate and say, okay, prove it.
Well, Diddy has a history of legal problems going back before he even got into creating Bad Boy. When he was in college, right after college, he created
criminal history category 1.
Right.
Yeah.
But then the offense level, where's this offense
right
level?
after.
Offense level is, I don't know what it's going to be. Sorry.
23.
Okay, why is it delay from muting? So, wait, what is this?
I think is Peter interviewing this?
There's 10 years is the max.
Yeah.
Look at similarly situated defendants. Yeah.
Do you think he's gonna get any enhancement?
No, there's no enhancements. It's Mann Act. What are they going to enhance with?
Well, who's the person? The third count?
Peter, are you interviewing somebody?
Yeah, he is.
I'm talking to some of the people outside.
Big Mike.
I remember him. Peter, your phone is
Ranking in the crowd.
yeah, Peter, your phone is pure as shit.
I think it's a transition.
So what? Yeah, what
You got
Mike
a
is
mic.
saying is he's got to go through the guideline. You get bad connection.
Yeah, I think because other people have their microphones. I don't know.
Interference with those tall buildings around there.
And then I'm muting him, but it's not even muting.
Apparently, this guy's irate that he might get 10 years. So I think Peter's explaining to him it depends on whether there are any aggravators that are apparent from the record.
Thank you. Swatter69 says this donation. Peter, can you mute? I can't. No, Peter, just mute. Peter, just mute up. Just you mute because I can't mute you for some reason. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Swatter69 says this donation is the least I can do for the good dialogue and content. You both are a blessing to society. So much has been learned of late. Thanks. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's lovely. I do see another person popped in.
By the way, how long have I been calling this saying it's going to be boiled down to this Mann Act, Jack Johnson thing?
Right. Okay, Jonathan,
Yes, hey Dana, how you doing?
honey, though, whatever you got going on in the background, turn it off. Turn the show off. Turn everything off. And let me put him back
Or at
backstage.
least muted.
I did mute him. Hello?
Not him. I'm just saying for him to mute it.
It's what? Can you give me what? How do you have? You need headphones. You need headphones, Jonathan.
Okay, hold on.
I heard that pretty well.
I gotta set up this phone line because I don't like when people come on because the audio just be so crappy. Peter sitting up here with a goddamn Obama phone, honey, aka cricket line.
Free enterprise.
And I'm just like, y'all need to do better. Let's try this again. Jonathan,
Yes, can you hear me now?
are you on a Bluetooth?
Yes.
Get off the Bluetooth. Get off the Bluetooth and then come back. Bluetooth is a no because Bluetooth, it comes off, the audio comes off so wacky on no Bluetooth. Let me just do a quick update. Okay, Peter, you muted yourself, which is good. So whenever you want to say something, just come on and say something. Actually, let me share this here real quick.
Okay, here we are, Matthew Russell Lee, Inner City Press, here at the Southern District of New York. Day 35 of the Sean Combs trial, and this may be our last walk, at least during this trial, because the verdict is in. Not guilty, Rico. Not guilty, sex trafficking of Cassie. Not guilty, sex trafficking of Jane. 2 guilties, transportation of for prostitution as to both Jane and Cassie. Now, Mark Agnifilo has asked for bail. He's asked for immediate release today, and there's letters due at 1 p.m. The judge didn't say, no way, go back to the MDC and we'll have briefing. So it could happen. It could happen. And I'm pretty sure that the Mann Act charges are going to be appealed. Alexandra Shapiro, during the pretrial, said, the statute is unconstitutional, a racist as applied. So I don't mean to, it's a tragic thing. I just spoke to somebody as I came out, and what I can say is that the conduct described is highly problematic. The thing that, I don't want to be graphic, but where Jane vomited between escort 1 and 3, and Combs apparently said, get out there and perform. But the thing is it a federal crime? Was it overcharged? I think, as I felt throughout, the prosecutors, for good reasons, from their point of view, we're trying to kind of break new ground and say, if you're an executive that uses your assistants to, provide procure and use sexual favors, you're going to be charged under Rico. Didn't work this time. I'd literally like to hear from the jurors. Personally, I think Jane's testimony wasn't that, the witness known as Jane wasn't that compelling, for a variety of reasons. The prosecutors chose the witnesses that they did. There's 30 civil cases. There's more people out there. I don't know if they held tryouts, but it is what it is. I know that there were going to be many people very disappointed about it. I'd kind of like to know what turned them. I think it's significant that nothing was asked as to Jane and sex trafficking. I think that it wasn't even close, apparently. They looked at it in terms of Cassie. They looked at the threats made on the plane from Khan. They looked at the videotape and the aftermath. They looked at what Daniel Phillips saw, but they came back with a not guilty. The Mann Act charges were kind of slam dunk. You had transportation of Daniel Phillip and all the Cabral and their performance. So it is what it is. We're going to be covering the 1 p.m. letters and the hearing on bail afterwards. But for now, the Week 8 book is coming, and it's going to be.
See, the thing with what he's talking about had absolutely nothing to do with the indictment, because he was not charged with trafficking that witness. He is only charged with the 2 named females. Now, My observation on this is there was a full report on his bond circumstances when this thing started, just after he got taken into custody. He had agreed to surrender himself, but the feds couldn't leave it at that. They had to grandstand, so they arrested him prior to the time he had agreed to surrender himself. There was a full exploration of his prior criminal involvement, his attachments to, if any, his attachments to the country, his connections, whether he was likely to flee. He was held in jail in lieu of what I think was at the time a $50 million bond. Now, he's been in jail, so what has changed substantially about his circumstances between then and now? In other words, he hasn't had the opportunity to commit any further offenses, so they can rely upon the previous bond information, bond relevant information, to determine whether or not one should be set. This is just going through the formalities and matching the necessary requirements for setting a bond. The judge doesn't have to, but he's, I guess, following, he's doing it by the numbers. So anyway, there is that. But this particular person is talking about things that are irrelevant. Does this have anything to do with public peace, dignity, and order? Or is it the opportunity for some group, some faction, or most alarmingly, for prosecutors to make new law? Now, we hear about the evils of judge-made law when actually that was legitimized by the first U.S. Supreme Court case ever heard. But the concept of prosecutorial-made new laws is frightening. So that ought to scare the devil out of any American citizen when somebody starts talking about prosecutors making new law, or some faction of people deciding that they're going to make new law when the law is criminal. It can result in the deprivation of somebody's liberty or being fined because somebody wants some changes in the circumstances of a particularized group. This equality is supposed to say nobody's better than anybody else in the law, and nobody gets treated any differently than anybody else in law. But here we have these people that nominally support that assertion going around saying we have this particular category of adults who should be treated with exceptional circumstances because somehow or another they never grew up.
All right, so let me do a test. Jonathan,
Yes, can you hear me?
do you have a television going on in the background?
No, I don't have nothing. No, can you hear me?
Yeah, but I could
I
just
hear you.
I hear myself, but go ahead. What you wanted to say?
Well, first, just wanted to say I love y'all show. I love you, Judge Joe Brown. I just had a couple of questions. Basically, am I to understand the counts that he was convicted of? They misdemeanors, right?
They could be, and then generally in the state, they involve misdemeanors. He got found, as I've been predicting for months, they found him guilty of Mann Act violation. I call it the Jack Johnson Act. It was designed to get black heavyweight champion Jack Johnson off the map, who had a white wife and could whip everybody. So the original statute said transporting females across state lines for illicit purposes, whatever the devil illicit purposes happen to be. They threw in for the purposes of prostitution, but actually what it seems to have been is for live sex shows instead of videoed sex shows that you can catch on Pornhub. So again, it's a Mann Act thing, and I think the whole statute was based in racism. It's racist in its application. It's sexist in its application. It allows too much discretion, and it allows too many things to be brought into play that have nothing to do with the criminal activity. It involves what in most instances is misdemeanor activity. Whether or not it's treated as that depends upon the particular circumstances as indicated by the federal guidelines. I've mentioned several times that 40, 45 years ago, when I used to represent a lot of pimps and prostitutes, a lot of the pimps got charged with this very same statute for transporting prostitutes from West Memphis, Arkansas to Memphis, Tennessee, or for what's in this series, P Valley from Mississippi up here to Memphis to dance in some of the strip clubs. So that is a common thing, and we'd usually resolve it. And basically what they were talking about then was a fine and cost, or be a witness for the feds because they're interested in somebody else, and everything gets dropped. I've even had school teachers involved in this just because they went to a conference and ran into an old girlfriend. One of them parked their car over in West Memphis. They rode over to Memphis, went shopping. He bought her a purse and some shoes. They went to a hotel. The feds were interested in the male teacher's big brother, so they bust him on the Mann Act to hold it over him so he'd give them evidence against his brother that they wanted for drug dealing. So, I mean, I beat the case for him, but I mean, that's what you have.
So anything else, Jonathan? Because I need to go on to the next speaker.
Yes, I have one more thing because I was watching and I seen where he offered to put up $1 million today if they let him out. What do you think about that in your opinion?
Yeah, considering the potential. And there's a possibility that when they got into looking at the sentencing stuff tonight, this afternoon, when they look at it, he may be in a time served situation. So in other words, you've already had a full bond hearing when he was trying to put up, what was it, a $50 million bond with 5 separate security systems on it. And that was denied. He's been in jail, so has anything changed? No, nothing's changed, and he's got ample connection to the United States, businesses, interest and stuff like that, family connections. And the liability he would actually serve, in spite of what media is talking about when they talk about the maximum sentence, it is very unlikely under the guidelines that would be applicable in this case for sentencing. See, there are federal sentencing guidelines. The judge just can't say this is how much time he's going to get. If he deviates up from what the guidelines say, he's got a hell of a job going for him to justify that. And if he goes under it, he's got that. So with the criminal record that either Diddy has or does not have, with his connections with the country, with other things that are in a checklist, so to speak, that has to be gone through, what does that say about what his likely sentence is to be? Based on that, is $1 million likely to assure his presence so that he can be sentenced? And will he show up for the balance of the proceedings if they do appeal the conviction? Now, there are lots of things that I have always thought for the last 50 years were unconstitutional about the Mann Act. So we've got a new Supreme Court that is more focused on the rights of citizens than it has been in decades. And they might say, oh, hell no, we can't have that kind of ambivalent criminal act that leaves so much up to somebody's interpretation where nobody can predict what's wrong. Like, for example, is it okay to pay somebody to come from New York to Florida to tape a porn video that they have on Pornhub? Or is that a crime if you say we're just going to have people watch and we're not going to record it for Pornhub?
Right. Thank you, John. Right.
Yeah, see, the government is a carryover. Somebody that's civil service that got appointed by those Biden or Obama idiots. And what's going on is this is a bureaucratic problem. You still have this crap that you can't get rid of because you can't fire them. They're civil service. Now, this person has got the hots for going after it and won't leave it. And frankly, she'd look better if she just said, in the interest of justice, all things considered, we lost. Let that be what we have, and anything else can be resolved on the civil side. But she won't let it go. And that shows the evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
See,
Cinderani, are you there? Cinderani,
or is it Cinderoni?
Cinderoni. We can't hear you.
Speak up.
All right, go out and come back. Go out and come back. Thank you, Barb. Says always love your content and want to support you and the judge. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we have another person. Hassan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Hello?
What happened? We
You
can
froze up there. Say what you said again. You froze up. You were saying you and your girlfriend were talking about it. Is it against the law? And then at that point, you cut off.
hold on.
We'll see.
Hold on. Wait, stop. Because they can't hear me. They cannot. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You're coming through fine.
The audience cannot hear me.
Well, I hear you. I did not know the audience could.
Hold on for a second.
He asked a pretty good question there.
What is? Wait, stop. They can't hear me. They cannot. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So now you get. I think it was him. I think because he was driving, and this is why I have to get phone lines. I have to get calls instead of the link. Okay. Yes, they can hear now. It was something when I brought him in.
I could hear. You know what? Actually, I could.
I could hear you, and I heard the guy that came in, but the audience couldn't hear nothing.
Okay, well, let me synthesize. He's asking essentially, what about these guys? He and his girlfriend were talking, and he's asking, what about these guys who pick up Miss Hottie on social media, et cetera, et cetera? I've said this, but people are coming in after I said it. One of my defendants I represented years ago was a school teacher. The person he transported across state lines was a female school teacher he had known for years. The feds had an interest in his brother, so they used the Mann Act to try and coerce this guy into giving evidence against his brother. Dana and I have talked about this. What if you have a significant other and you buy her a plane ticket and you guys want to get your freak on at a resort hotel down in the Bahamas, or get naked on the beach down in the grill. That would qualify as an illicit act, which is what it says. See, several decades ago, they had an amendment, so illicit got defined as, amongst other things, prostitution. But you see, what they defined as prostitution in this case is basically live audience sex acts, which are the same sex acts that are recorded and played on Pornhub. So would the Mann Act apply to everybody that crosses a state line to participate in a Pornhub video? Or would it apply to Kim Kardashian and Ray J, who went from Los Angeles down to Mexico, where they recorded what they did in the motel that you've been able to buy for 25 years for $4.95 a pop in most major motels, hotels, and on Xfinity, Comcast, etc., under adult entertainment for $4.95 for the short, more interesting version of $7.95. Would they be prosecutable? Yes, under these standards.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I need to. I want to bring him. I want to try this again. So, Kassan,
your question.
Can you say something? Because I want the audience. So I need the audience. All right, just say testimony. We can hear you. I need the audience. Yes, can you hear us?
You can hear us, can't you?
No, he can't hear us. All right. I'm not gonna
I heard him, but
yeah, give me a second. He can hear us. So wait 1 second. So this is Cinderoni, I just brought you in, but we can't even see you. So honestly, I'm not doing a link anymore. I'm gonna set up the phone line. So for next time, it'll just be the phone line. Sorry, guys. My apologies. And we do have an update. We do have an update. Give me a second.
But seriously, there's an important point he made me think of. Kim Kardashian and Ray J could be prosecuted under this very same statute for Mann Act violations because they crossed state lines. They went across international state lines and went down to Mexico when they did that thing that Kim is famous for, that you can catch on adult entertainment in so many hotels and motels over the last 25 years. That was illicit. That was sex acts. There was money that was gained for that. So that becomes classic Mann Act, crossing state or international lines for illicit purposes. In other words, to film
we heard you don't
sexual activity.
All right, so let me go here. We already heard that. You don't have to repeat that. So let me go here. We have an update. Sean Combs' lawyer, 6-page letter asking for release today on bail has just been docketed. It says Inner City Press story is on U.S. Attorney's Office letter. It's not in the docket as of 1:33 p.m. today. So, and this is the letter. Mr. Combs moves for release on appropriate conditions pursuant pending his sentencing proceeding. Given the jurors' clear verdict acquitting Mr. Combs on the Rico conspiracy and sex trafficking counts, continued detention of Mr. Combs is inappropriate as these proceedings have demonstrated. Can you say something, Judge? Okay, have demonstrated.
I'm listening to it. Technically, it should have been filed as a motion and appropriately styled. He filed it as a letter, which indicates somebody in the office, when they got word of what was going on, rushed to throw this together this morning, or he prepared it last night. But technically, it should have the style at the top: United States of America versus Sean Combs, etc., and the docket number and style, motion to set bond. But it's not. So it's something for the record to quickly get it in there.
Well, yeah, because they only had a couple of hours to do so.
Yeah, I used to do that. I'd anticipate what would happen throw it
So let me
together.
just finish reading it. It says,
I'll be 5 minutes late because I had to draw it up.
all right, let me finish reading this. It says Mr. Combs came to New York to surrender in order to defend against the government charges because he was committed to showing his innocence. Since his arrest and detention on September 17, 2024, Mr. Combs has obeyed the court, respected these proceedings, and demonstrated model behavior at the DC. And today, the jury unambiguously rejected the government's allegations that Mr. Combs ran a years-long criminal enterprise or engaged in sex trafficking, the core of the government's case. Mr. Combs stands convicted of 2 Mann Act counts, and his sentencing exposure is substantially lower than when the government initially sought detention. The court should release Mr. Combs on the proposed conditions. We don't have the conditions here.
Well, yeah, $1 million bond. For God's sake, he'll show back up.
Right. So 5 seconds. Okay, so update. Hearing after the submission just now of bail letters by Combs and the U.S. Attorney Office, judge will be reconvening the parties in court at 5 p.m. in 3 hours. Honey, we will not be up here for no 3 hours. So they submitted, the Combs attorney has submitted the paperwork in. The prosecutors, the AUSA, they got to submit theirs, and the judge is saying we're going to come back at 5, and he's going to come back with his decision at 5. We won't be here, but we would definitely do a pre-record.
Yeah, actually.
Well, maybe we'll go live tonight. Maybe we
It's a pretty good defense job. They took some risk that they didn't have to take, but they panned out. Like I said, I would have put on some expert proof about sadomasochism, but it's approved unnecessary. That's sort of like you flying a fighter plane and it gets shot up in a combat mission and you don't have on a parachute, but you managed to land a crippled plane anyway, where you got back down, but it sure as hell would have been better off if you had had a parachute on.
Right. So listen.
Yeah.
Hold on. We had a lovely, this is a lovely show. But yes, honey, I'm petty, and I'm about to block your ass, JA. Because we're not doing that.
Explain something I'm doing. I'm being repetitive, but I'm getting text that I can see on my phone. And what's going on is people are just now tuning in. So although I've explained this before, they've missed it and they're asking essentially the same question. So,
and that's fine, but you know what, Judge? I'm going to say go back to the beginning of the show, because as soon as we went live, we went right into the charges of guilty and not guilty in the Mann Act, and you broke it all down. They could go back to the beginning. We will be coming back live tonight because we want to do a show showing Diddy walk out the courts or whatever, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, of course, pre-record tomorrow, some other stuff. Because it's something.
I'm presuming, let me interrupt. I'm presuming that when you edit this, you will cut out my restatement of what I've said, because when you play it on YouTube, people can fast forward or go back.
What do you mean your restatement?
Yeah, it's already been explained. I was just looking at the new people.
Oh, yeah. No, I get it. And that's nice, you know, to re-explain it, but I'm just
it's
like
boring to me, but I mean, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, right now I'm just like, listen, just go back to the beginning. Just go back to the beginning. And I don't know I don't even think the lawyers are going to come out right now, because the lawyers, they're not going to give a press conference now. They're going to give a press conference after the bell, right?
Yeah. See, again, I'll point this out. They're trying to get a bond set for him. Absolutely appropriate. The next thing that's going to happen is, depending upon the order that the court sets, there will be a motion for new trial where the defense will argue and the prosecution will attempt to rebut them to the issue of something went wrong at the trial. So the guilty verdict should be set aside. The not guilty verdict, there's nothing that can be done. The 3 not guilty counts, there's nothing that can be done to resurrect them. They're dead. So the argument would be the verdict of guilty on the 2 Mann Acts should be set aside for a number of reasons. Whatever the resolution by the trial judge, that will be brought up on appeal. All right. After that, there will be the issue of sentencing. How much time is he going to get under the sentencing guidelines for the conviction? Or the judge may allow that to be reversed so you have sentencing before you get the motion for new trial. Because in a case like this, where there's not liability for a great amount of time, that may have a lot to do with how the rest of the proceedings take place. In other words, if it's a situation where even if you sentence him, he's not going to jail because he's already done the time, or he's out on this $1 million bond, so it's not going to impact anything one way or the other. It'll make 3 or 4 or 5 weeks difference in what happens to let him stay out on appeal so you can resolve it in the long term. Now, if he gets the bond denied, then that's going to, well, being deprived of your liberty is being deprived of your liberty.
Want to
see what they did with Dr. Cosby.
Oh, wait, let me read this real quick. So let me just go in a little bit more details. The prosecution convictions. Okay, the defense proposed a $1 million bond co-signed by Mr. Combs, his mother, sister, and Shara Chapman, the mother of his oldest daughter, Chance. His passports would be surrendered to pre-trial services, and his travel will be restricted. The judicial districts around New York, Los Angeles, Miami. He will also agree to drug testing. So those are the conditions that the defense has laid out for the conditions of his bail. What happened?
Oh, God.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, he's coming back. I told you, people want to keep calling and keep calling and keep calling. And a lot of times people do this on purpose. And that's all right. Because, honey, you could never stop this show. Never. Never. And to all you women in there, and I hate to say this, but I am going to go there. I'm going to go there. A lot of you black women, white women too, but a lot of you black women, when you sit up here and the problem is you always try to sit up here and tell people what they should and should not do. Hating ass people. The show is still going to go on, whether you hate or not, whether you like me or not, whether you have a problem or not. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's the thing. We're not going to go over the whole case because we went over the whole case 2.5 hours ago. Just go back to the beginning of this show, and because we get right into it. There's no lead up. The judge goes right into it, and he covered so much, and we are about to get up out of here. He covered so much this afternoon. We had 3,000 people in the live. So it was a lot. He covered a lot. So I need you guys to go back to the beginning of this video, and he went through each sentence, each count, guilty and not guilty, the Mann Act, everything. We got into Cassie, we got into the lawsuits, we got into the trust. We got into everything, the media, everything. So yeah, we are, and then it's some things I got to do, some things you have to do, Judge, today. But I would like to come back. Oh, it looked like you did freeze up. I don't know. Let me see something because they're saying no, I can see you. You're not frozen on my end. Yeah, on you're frozen on the TV thing here. I don't know. Let me see something. And then let me bring him back in. All right. I don't know. Hopefully he's still not frozen. But I can see you talking and hear you and everything, but they can't. It's something with the connection. This always happens. But anyway, Judge, I would like to come back this evening. Can we come back this evening? Yeah, you're frozen. Hold on for a second. They can't even hear you. Can you go out and come back in? Because I'm listening now. They can't even hear you. Like, and I thought me and him been talking this whole time. He's been saying a lot and he's frozen, but y'all couldn't even hear him. That's crazy. But you know what? I'm glad it happened towards the end and not in the beginning. Yeah. So when I wasn't talking, the judge was talking. And I thought you guys could hear him even though he was frozen. But I'm glad that all the technical stuff is happening now at the end because we've been up here for 2 hours and 33 minutes. Diddy, whether he's going to be released or not, whether he's going to be granted bail or not, is not going to happen until 5 p.m. So me and the judge is going to come back this evening and talk about it some more. This is yeah, I think it is software related. Okay, let's see now. I can hear you. I can see you. Guys, let me know if the judge is still frozen or if you could hear him or not. But I was saying I'm glad this is happening now because we're about to leave out, but this is towards the end anyway, so this wasn't happening earlier. No, you're still frozen and they can't hear you. We're gonna have to end it. Honey, I guess they got mad. Probably them two little heifers, honey, that I had to hide from my channel. I don't know. People's like, stop cutting him off. You're being rude on that bullshit. And I'm just tired. I just hide people. I'm not gonna go back and forth, just hide people, but they can't hear you. Okay, the judge is frozen. You can't hear the judge. I hear the judge. I see the judge. You guys can't hear him or see him. So we're gonna end now and we're gonna come back this evening. So we're gonna come back this evening. All right. He said yes. So while we whoopee. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. We will see you tonight. We'll see you tonight. Bye.